The landscape of Scotland has changed dramatically over the last few thousand years, very often because of the activities of the people living here. We feel these days that industry is changing the character of Scotland, but actually this has been happening for a long time. And here at Killgallioch, just north of New Luce, is a really good example of how this happens. The last ice age finished 10,000 years ago. At that point, glaciers, great sheets of ice, would have covered Scotland. Because of all the ice, sea levels were much lower, and there was land between mainland Europe and Britain. As temperatures started to rise, animals and plants would have colonised over this land, and gradually the dominant habitat here became broadleaf woodland. 6,000 years ago, this entire landscape would have been covered in oak, ash and elm trees. Around 4,000 years ago, there was another change in the climate. It became windy, wet and cold. This coincided with the first human settlements, and in order to build these and also to provide fuel for fires and space for livestock, the people cut down the forests. Because the climate had changed, the forests never grew back again, and instead the landscape started to be covered with moss, and peat bogs began to form. Peat is formed when there is so much water that the land never dries out. The plants can't rot down, and instead they get preserved and squashed by new plants growing on top of them. Here on the west coast of Scotland, there is often so much rainfall that this can happen even on the tops of hills, and this creates what are called blanket bogs. So called because it looks like somebody has draped a blanket over the landscape. They're really important habitats. There are lots of plants and animals that grow there that simply are not found anywhere else. They're also really important for carbon storage because they don't just store carbon, they continuously absorb it as new plants grow and are unable to rot down. For thousands of years, the blanket bogs made land unusable for people, but by the 18th century, new technology changed that. Ploughs were developed that allowed land that was previously unfarmable to be brought into use, and the decline of the blanket bogs began. By the 19th century, this area was covered by farms like this one here at Laggangarn. They would mostly have been sheep farms because the poor quality of the soil made it not very useful for anything else, but they survived right up to the early 20th century. In 1919, the Forestry Commission was established after the First World War in order to increase the production of timber in Britain. By 1939, it had become the largest landowner in the country. Killgallioch Forest here was planted by the Forestry Commission, which are now called Forestry and Land Scotland, on areas of land that had been farms before. In order to grow useful quantities of timber quickly, they imported species of fast-growing conifer from abroad, species like the Douglas fir, the lodgepole pine, and most importantly, the Sitka spruce. This one tree dominates vast quantities of the landscape. In recent times, Forestry and Land Scotland have started to diversify their planting more broadleaves and starting to restore areas of blanket bog that have been destroyed by the forestry. But there are still very large areas of Scotland that are dominated by Sitka spruce. Today, there's another industry changing the landscape of Scotland. As we have a better understanding of the effect of fossil fuels on climate change, it becomes ever more important to find other ways of generating electricity. And now, that wet and windy climate that created the blanket bogs is being put to another use. Killgallioch Windfarm was built by ScottishPower Renewables. It was completed in 2017. And as part of the planning arrangement when it was built, they agreed to provide Dumfries and Galloway Council with funding to employ 2 countryside rangers to maintain the Southern Upland Way, myself and my colleague Ross. Without that money, none of the work that we do maintaining this trail would be possible. I've arranged to meet up with Siobhan from ScottishPower Renewables to find out a bit more about the wind farm. Siobhan, thanks for meeting us today. Could you tell us a bit more about the Killgallioch Wind Farm?
Absolutely. I mean, it's great for me to be standing here on Killgallioch Windfarm today talking to you. We first started speaking to the communities about building a wind farm here back in 2009. And since then, a huge amount of work, many conversations in village halls. We were absolutely delighted to have the wind farm become operational in 2017. I mean, there was a lot of work went into the construction process. There was a large number of Dumfries and Galloway companies involved, had significant roles. Particularly in terms of plant hire and major groundworks. So yeah, we were really delighted to see the site completed in 2017.
Fantastic. And now it's all here. Is there a lot of work required to maintain it and keep it operational?
So there's a team of 4 based here in the on-site control building, and they're supported by a team of about 10 to 12 turbine technicians. So they look after the turbines the same way that we would look after our cars, with regular checks, annual service, responding to any faults. And also there's work involved in managing and maintaining the access tracks, fencing, forest, that kind of thing. So much of the site remains a commercial forest, but we've also committed to delivering a habitat management plan here on site, and that will involve restoring 25 hectares of peatland that was damaged by historical forest practices, but also we'll be replanting 400 hectares of forest, and about half of that will be broadleaf species, so adding to the habitat value of the area.
Fantastic. Now, this wind farm provides funding to employ me and my colleague Ross as Southern Upland Way Rangers, and that keeps this path open to the public. What other benefits does this wind farm provide?
So the wind farm provides a community benefit fund, and that's about £1.25 million a year that go to the local area, and it so far has delivered huge amounts of projects and initiatives across Wigtonshire and South Carrick. We've been so impressed with the ideas that have been brought forward in the community. There's been a real drive to maximise the opportunity, so the funds have been used to unlock an additional £6.5 million of funding, so match funding from other sources, which is really impressive. So the projects and initiatives that have been taken forward by the community have been huge and varied, but some examples are the Glentrool and Bargrennan Community Trust. They are converting their old primary school into an energy efficient and sustainable community hub. Another example is Luce Community Trust. So they have purchased the hotel in the village, the Kenmure Arms, and they now have a local contractor working to renovate that property, and they've really got big plans for the future, adding new phases and really working to deliver for the locals and for tourists that come to visit the area.
That would be a great facility for Southern Upland Way walkers as well, won't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Similarly, up in Bar Hill, they've got a similar project planned for the Trout Inn, which is their local pub again, had been closed down for a while. And we've seen over £150,000 of this fund spent on projects and initiatives that will enhance the lives of the children and young people in the area, which is great. Similarly, about £150,000 has been spent to deliver projects that promote the local cultural and environmental heritage. So really there's a lot getting delivered right across the community.
Fantastic. And now just this month we've had the COP conference in Glasgow looking at the climate crisis. Presumably this wind farm has a lot of benefits in helping preserve the climate.
Absolutely. So ScottishPower, we're a principal partner of the COP26 event, which was fantastic. This wind farm alone has 96 turbines. That's enough to generate clean, green electricity for over 150,000 homes. So we are really proud to be part of that solution and to be bringing forward a better future for us all and helping Scotland meet its net zero ambitions by 2045.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for meeting me today and telling us a bit more about this amazing wind farm.
No problem.
Cheers.
Thanks.
The landscape of Scotland has changed continuously for thousands of years. Many people will argue about what the landscape of this area should look like. Should it be broadleaf woodland as it was originally? Should it be blanket bog and farmland as it was for thousands of years? Or should it be forestry and wind turbines as it is today? It's doubtless going to change in the future as people find new uses for the land, but whatever happens, the view from here at the top of Craigairy Fell is going to remain fantastic.